So footage just dropped of Shedeur Sanders at what might be his final practice with the Cleveland Browns. And y'all, the internet is losing it right now. We're talking snow falling, music blasting in the background, and a quarterback who's been through absolute chaos this entire season, just out there getting his work in before what could be the last game of this wild experiment. And I'm not gonna lie to you, watching this footage hit different. Because when you look at everything that's happened, everything that's been said, everything that's swirling around this organization right now, man, this whole situation just feels heavy. Listen, the Browns are getting ready to face the Bengals. Shedeur's preparing to go up against Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And while that's happening, there's reporters, insiders, beat writers, everyone in Cleveland media talking about whether the head coach is even going to be there next season. You got articles dropping every single day about Kevin Stefanski's future. You got speculation about whether Shedeur's even going to be the starter moving forward. You got Dillon Gabriel's name being thrown around like there's going to be some kind of competition for the #1 spot. And through all of this, here's Shedeur Sanders, rookie quarterback, out there in the snow, putting in the work, preparing for a game that might not even matter in terms of his long-term future with this team. Let me tell you something, and I want y'all to really hear this. This isn't about making excuses. This isn't about painting Shedeur as some kind of victim. But when you look at the timeline of this entire season, when you really break down what this young man has walked into, the circumstances he's been dealing with, the pressure that's been on his shoulders from day one, it raises some uncomfortable questions about how this whole thing has been handled. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about how we even got here. Shedeur Sanders gets drafted by the Cleveland Browns. Already, there's pressure. You're the son of Deion Sanders. You played at Colorado. You got the name recognition, the hype, the spotlight following you everywhere you go. Some people love you. Some people already decided they don't like you before you even take a snap. That's just the reality of being who he is. But beyond all that, you're walking into an organization that's been searching for a franchise quarterback for decades. The Browns have been through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. The pressure to be the one is immense before you even get to training camp. Now, from what we've seen throughout this season, Shedeur didn't just walk into an ideal situation. He didn't come into a stable offensive line. He didn't come into a coaching staff that was secure in their positions. He didn't come into a locker room where everything was already figured out. Based on the footage, based on the reports, based on what insiders have been saying all season long, this has been chaos from Jump Street. Let's talk about the offensive line situation, because this is something that keeps coming up. The Browns reportedly brought in a new center. They've been making adjustments along the offensive line throughout the season. And when you watch the games, when you look at the film, you can see that Shedeur has been under pressure constantly. Now, I'm not saying every sack is the offensive line's fault. I'm not saying Shedeur has been perfect in the pocket. But what I am saying is this. It's real hard to develop as a young quarterback when you can't trust the protection in front of you. It's real hard to go through your progressions when you got defenders in your face every other play. It's real hard to build confidence and rhythm when you're spending more time running for your life than actually playing the position. And here's the thing that nobody really wants to talk about, but we gotta address it. There were other quarterbacks on this roster. Dillon Gabriel's name keeps getting brought up. You had Deshaun Watson still in the building for part of the season before his situation changed. So the question becomes, why was Shedeur thrown into the fire the way he was? Why wasn't there more of a plan to protect him, develop him, bring him along at a pace that made sense for a rookie quarterback? Now, before y'all come at me in the comments, I'm not saying Shedeur should have been babied. I'm not saying he wasn't ready to play. What I'm saying is when you look at how other organizations develop their young quarterbacks, there's usually some kind of structure, there's usually some kind of plan. There's usually protection built around them so they can actually learn and grow without getting destroyed in the process. But with Cleveland, from what we've seen, it's felt different. It's felt like they threw him out there and said, "Figure it out." And when things didn't go perfectly, when the losses started piling up, when the offensive struggles became the story every single week, suddenly the narrative shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about the offensive line. It wasn't about the play calling. It wasn't about the lack of weapons or the coaching or any of the other factors that impact a quarterback's success. It became about Shedeur Sanders not being good enough. Let me read y'all something that one of the ESPN Cleveland insiders said. Tony Grossi went on air and basically said that Shedeur hasn't earned the #1 spot for next year. That there's going to be a competition. That Dillon Gabriel's in it. That Deshaun Watson might even be in it depending on how things shake out. Listen to how that sounds. You draft a quarterback. You start him all season. You put him through everything he's been through. And then, before the season's even over, you got people in the media saying he hasn't earned the starting job for next year? Now, I don't know if that's coming from the organization. I don't know if that's Tony Grossi's personal opinion. But the fact that it's even being discussed out loud on ESPN Cleveland tells you everything you need to know about how this situation is being perceived. There's uncertainty. There's doubt. There's a lack of commitment to the young quarterback who was supposed to be the future. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Mary Kay Cabot, one of the most connected Browns reporters out there, has been talking about the vibe around the organization. She said, "There's an air of potential change hanging over the facility." She said the silence is screaming right now. She said it's uncharacteristic when everything's not okay heading into the off-season. What does that tell you? What does it tell you when the most plugged-in reporter covering the team is basically saying something feels off? Let's be real for a second. Two things can be true at the same time. Shedeur Sanders can have areas where he needs to improve as a quarterback, and the Cleveland Browns can have failed to put him in a position to succeed. Both of those things can exist together. This isn't excuses. This is context. And the context matters. When you look at the footage from this final practice, when you see Shedeur out there in the snow, you got to think about what's going through his head. Does he know Kevin Stefanski might not be back? Does he know there's talk about Dillon Gabriel competing for his job? Does he know the organization might be looking at a complete reset in 2027 instead of building around him? How do you focus on preparing for Joe Burrow and the Bengals when there's all this noise swirling around you? And listen, I want to give Shedeur credit for something. Because through all of this, through all the pressure, through all the chaos, through all the speculation, he's kept showing up. He's kept putting in the work. You don't see him complaining publicly. You don't see him throwing coaches or teammates under the bus. You don't see him making excuses. He's handling the situation with a level of maturity and professionalism that a lot of veteran quarterbacks wouldn't even have. But here's what I keep coming back to, and this is what really bothers me about this whole thing. The Cleveland Browns have been searching for a franchise quarterback for how long? Decades, right? They finally draft a quarterback with a first-round pick. A guy who has the talent, the pedigree, the arm, the intelligence to potentially be that guy. And instead of doing everything possible to maximize his development, instead of building around him and protecting him and setting him up for success, it feels like they threw him into a situation where failure was almost inevitable. Now, I'm not saying the Browns sabotaged Shedeur Sanders. I'm not making conspiracy theories here. What I'm saying is, when you look at the decisions that were made, when you look at the lack of protection, when you look at how quickly the narrative turned against him, when you look at the fact that his job is already being questioned before his rookie season is even over, it raises questions. Uncomfortable questions. Questions about whether this organization even knows what it's doing when it comes to developing a quarterback. Let me put it to you like this. If you're a young quarterback coming out in the next draft, and you're watching what happened with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland, does that make you want to go there? If you're an agent representing a top quarterback prospect, are you excited about the possibility of your client ending up with the Browns? Because the way this has played out, the way this whole situation has been handled, it doesn't exactly scream quarterback-friendly organization. And here's the other thing that's wild about all this. You got articles coming out left and right about Kevin Stefanski's future. Whether he's going to be fired, whether he's going to leave for the New York Giants, whether the organization is ready to move on from him. And in a lot of these articles, they mention that Stefanski has won Coach of the Year twice. They talk about how he's brought stability and professionalism to the organization. They talk about seasons where the Browns outperformed expectations under his leadership. So, if Kevin Stefanski is such a good coach, if he's won Coach of the Year twice, if he's brought all this stability and success to the organization, why did this season go the way it did? Why wasn't he able to develop Shedeur Sanders the way everyone hoped? Why is there so much dysfunction and uncertainty right now? I'm not trying to put all the blame on Stefanski. I'm really not. But when you're the head coach, when you're the leader of the organization, when you're the one calling the plays and making the decisions about how to use your rookie quarterback, you got to take some responsibility for how things turned out. And if the reports are true, if there really is a chance he's gone after this season, then what does that say about Shedeur's future? Does a new coach mean a fresh start for him? Or does it mean they bring in their own guy and Shedeur becomes an afterthought? Let's talk about the Dillon Gabriel situation for a minute, because this is something that's been brought up by multiple insiders. The idea that there's going to be a competition between Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel for the starting job next season. Now, on the surface, competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. Competition can push guys to get better. Competition can bring out the best in players. But here's what doesn't sit right with me. You draft Shedeur Sanders to be your franchise quarterback. You start him all season as a rookie. You put him through everything he's been through. And then, before the season's even over, you're already talking about a competition with another quarterback? That doesn't sound like an organization that's confident in their guy. That doesn't sound like an organization that's committed to building around their young quarterback. That sounds like an organization that's already looking for the next option. And if Kevin Stefanski leaves, if he goes to the Giants or somewhere else, what happens to Dillon Gabriel? Because one of the insiders mentioned that Gabriel might follow Stefanski wherever he goes. So if that happens, does the competition talk go away? Or does the organization bring in another veteran to compete with Shedeur? Do they look at the draft again? Do they punt on the quarterback position entirely and wait for 2027 like some people are suggesting? This is the kind of uncertainty that kills quarterback development. This is the kind of instability that makes it almost impossible for a young player to thrive. You need consistency. You need commitment. You need an organization that believes in you and is willing to stick with you through the growing pains. And right now, based on everything we're hearing, based on all the speculation and the reports and the insider commentary, it doesn't feel like Shedeur Sanders has that in Cleveland. Now, let's talk about this practice footage for a second, because this is what started this whole conversation. Mary Kay Cabot posted video of Shedeur at practice. It's snowing, there's music playing in the background, and Shedeur's out there getting his work in, preparing for the Bengals game. And the internet went crazy over it. Some people looked at it and saw a young quarterback staying focused despite all the chaos. Some people saw it as a symbolic moment, the end of an era before everything changes. Some people looked at it and just felt sad, like they were watching someone who gave everything he had to this team, knowing it might not be enough. And here's the thing about that footage. It's such a small moment. It's just practice. It's just a quarterback going through his routine before a game. But because of everything else that's going on, Because of all the speculation and the uncertainty and the questions about the future, it feels bigger than that. It feels like a snapshot of a moment in time that might be looked back on differently depending on what happens next. If Shedeur Sanders ends up being the Browns' starting quarterback next season, if he takes a step forward, if the organization commits to building around him and he becomes the franchise guy they hoped he'd be, then this footage becomes a moment of resilience. It becomes proof that he kept working even when everything around him was falling apart. But if things go the other way, if there's a coaching change and a new regime comes in and Shedeur ends up getting pushed aside for another quarterback, if he becomes another name on the long list of Browns quarterbacks who didn't work out, then this footage becomes something sadder. It becomes a reminder of what could have been if the circumstances had been different. And that's what makes this whole situation so frustrating to watch. Because we don't know how this story ends yet. We don't know if Shedeur is going to get another chance to prove himself in Cleveland. We don't know if the organization is going to make the necessary changes to actually support their young quarterback. We don't know if Kevin Stefanski is going to be back or if there's going to be a complete reset. What we do know is that a rookie quarterback walked into one of the most difficult situations in the NFL and did his best to navigate it. We know that he faced pressure from day one, both on the field and off it. We know that he dealt with a struggling offensive line, coaching uncertainty, media criticism, and constant speculation about his future. And through all of that, he kept showing up and doing the work. Now, is Shedeur Sanders a perfect quarterback? No. Does he have things he needs to improve? Absolutely. Has he made mistakes this season? Of course. But the question we need to be asking isn't whether Shedeur's been perfect. The question is whether the Cleveland Browns have done everything they could to help him succeed. And based on what we've seen, based on the reports, based on the insider commentary, based on the instability and the uncertainty and the dysfunction that's been surrounding this organization all season long, it's hard to say yes to that question. Let me tell you what really gets me about all this. The Browns have been through so many quarterbacks. They've had so many chances to get this right. And every single time, it feels like they find a way to mess it up. They either don't give the guy enough support, or they give up on him too quickly, or they create so much instability around the position that nobody could possibly succeed. And now, with Shedeur Sanders, it feels like we're watching the same pattern play out all over again. Think about the pressure that comes with being a Browns quarterback. Think about the history of failure at that position in that organization. Think about the fan base that's desperate for someone to finally be the answer. Think about the media scrutiny that comes with playing in a market like Cleveland. Now add on top of that the pressure of being Deion Sanders' son. The pressure of coming from Colorado with all that attention. The pressure of being a first-round pick with expectations to turn the franchise around immediately. That's what Shedeur Sanders has been dealing with. And through all of it, he's maintained his composure. He's handled himself with class. He hasn't made excuses. He hasn't blamed others. He's just kept working. But here's the reality. Talent alone isn't enough in the NFL. Toughness alone isn't enough. You need the right situation. You need the right coaching. You need the right protection. You need organizational stability. You need a plan. And right now, in Cleveland, it's not clear that any of those things exist. The reports coming out about Kevin Stefanski's future are telling. When you got multiple reporters saying there's a vibe around the organization that change is coming, that's not just speculation. That's people who are connected to the team, who have sources inside the building, who understand the dynamics at play, telling you that something's off. When you got beat writers talking about deafening silence from ownership about the coach's future, that means something. When you got articles dropping every day questioning whether Stefanski is going to be back, that creates an environment of uncertainty that impacts everyone, especially a rookie quarterback trying to find his footing. And here's what's so frustrating about the timing of all this. This is supposed to be the time when you're evaluating your young quarterback. This is supposed to be the time when you're sitting down as an organization and saying, okay, what did we see this season? What are his strengths? What does he need to work on? How do we build around him moving forward? But instead, the conversation in Cleveland is about whether the coach is going to be there, whether there's going to be a quarterback competition, whether they should just punt on the whole thing and wait for 2027. How is Shedeur supposed to focus on his development when the future is that uncertain? How is he supposed to trust the organization when they're already publicly questioning whether he's earned the starting job for next season? How is he supposed to build chemistry with his teammates and coaches when everyone might be gone in a few weeks? This is what I mean when I say the circumstances matter. This is what I mean when I say context is important. Because yes, Shedeur Sanders needs to improve as a quarterback. Yes, he needs to take responsibility for his mistakes. Yes, he needs to get better at reading defenses, making quicker decisions, whatever areas of his game need work. But it's also true that the Cleveland Browns have put him in an incredibly difficult position to succeed. Let's talk about what happens next, because that's what everyone's wondering. If Kevin Stefanski gets fired or leaves for another job, what does that mean for Shedeur? Does a new coach give him a fresh start? Or does a new coach want to bring in their own guy? If Stefanski stays, what does that mean? Does the relationship between coach and quarterback improve? Does Stefanski commit to building the offense around Shedeur's strengths? Or do we see more of the same struggles we saw this season? If Dillon Gabriel ends up competing for the starting job, how does that play out? Is it a real competition? Or is it the organization's way of creating an exit plan if Shedeur doesn't take a big leap forward? And if Gabriel wins the job, does that mean the Browns wasted a first-round pick on Shedeur? Does it mean they gave up on him too soon? These are the questions that nobody has answers to right now. These are the uncomfortable realities of being a Cleveland Browns quarterback in 2025. And these are the things that Shedeur Sanders is dealing with while trying to prepare for a game against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. One of the things that's been mentioned by multiple people is that the Browns might just be punting on the quarterback position entirely. The idea that there's no good quarterbacks coming out in the next draft, so they're going to run it back with whatever they have and wait for 2027. If that's true, if that's really the plan, what does that say about how the organization views Shedeur? Are they saying he's not the guy? Are they saying they need to see more? Are they saying they don't know what they have yet? Because here's the thing. At some point, you got to make a decision. At some point, you got to commit to a quarterback and build around him. You can't keep kicking the can down the road. You can't keep waiting for the perfect situation or the perfect prospect. You got to take what you have, invest in it, and try to make it work. And if the Browns are really planning to just wait until 2027 to address the quarterback position, that tells you they don't believe Shedeur Sanders is the answer. And if they don't believe that, then why did they draft him in the first place? This is the kind of organizational dysfunction that keeps teams stuck in mediocrity. This is the kind of decision-making that leads to decades of failure at the most important position in football. And this is exactly what Browns fans have been dealing with for years. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying Shedeur Sanders is guaranteed to be a great quarterback. I'm not saying he's above criticism. I'm not saying the Browns owe him anything just because they drafted him. What I'm saying is, when you look at the totality of the situation, when you consider everything that's happened, everything he's had to deal with, all the instability and uncertainty and lack of support, it raises serious questions about whether he ever had a real chance. And that's what makes watching this practice footage so heavy. Because you see a young man who's been through hell this season, who's faced more adversity and criticism and doubt than most rookies ever deal with. And he's still out there in the snow putting in the work. He's still preparing. He's still trying. He's still showing up. And you gotta wonder if it's gonna matter. You gotta wonder if the organization is even gonna give him a real opportunity to show what he can do with the right support around him. The reality is, we're at a crossroads. The Browns are at a crossroads with their coaching staff, with their quarterback situation, with the entire direction of the franchise. And Shedeur Sanders is caught in the middle of all that uncertainty. His future, his career, his potential, it's all hanging in the balance while the organization figures out what they want to do. And that's not fair to him. It's not fair to any rookie quarterback. But it's especially not fair when you consider that the Browns are the ones who created the situation. They're the ones who drafted him. They're the ones who started him. They're the ones who put him behind a struggling offensive line. They're the ones who allowed all this coaching uncertainty to become a distraction. And now, they're the ones questioning whether he's good enough. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave Shedeur Sanders? What happens after the Bengals game? What happens in the offseason? Does everything change? Does nothing change? Does Shedeur get another shot? Does he become just another name on the list of Browns quarterbacks who didn't work out? Nobody knows. And that's the problem. That's the uncomfortable reality of this entire situation. A rookie quarterback gave everything he had to an organization that might not give him a real chance to succeed. And now, we're all just waiting to see what happens next, knowing that whatever does happen, it's probably not going to be fair, and it's probably not going to make sense, because this is the Cleveland Browns, and this is what they do.